and welcome to another episode of Transfiguration. My name's Alexis, and I am going to be hosting Jess today. Now, we're a little earlier than normal. Normally, we come on around 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, but because our guest is from the UK, we need to start a little earlier. So, let's bring her on and get... So welcome to Transfiguration. For those of you who haven't been with us before, this is an episode where we gather real stories from real trans people, and now we have our guest of honor. Welcome.
Hello.
So if you would...
Alexis.
Hi. I'm a little worse for wear right now. I walked into a shelf, so I have...
No.
I've tried to cover them as best I can, but... Okay, so how about you start with introducing yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jessica, or Jess. I'm a transgender woman. I've been, out and aware of being trans for about 7 months now. So I would say I'm kind of in my early stages, still kind of figuring myself out and still just starting my transition.
Okay, and your pronouns are she, her?
Correct, yes. She,
Just making sure. We never like to assume on this show because,
No, that's good.
We have all kinds of... Now, I'm sorry, my lighting is bothering me. I need to fix this. So, I'm not used to doing shows this early with the sun still out, so I had to change my backdrop to block out the sun because that's a window. And there's still light outside, and I don't know what to do with it, so... Well,
it's very dark here, so I've got all the lights on.
I imagine because it's 10:30. I feel bad that you're staying up so late, but
It's okay.
We'll get this show started. Okay, so let's start with the standard question I ask pretty much everybody: is at what point did you identify or realize about yourself that you were either transgender or at least you didn't fit the standard dual role of societal expectations?
Sure. I guess the first time I could put into words that I am transgender was about 7 months ago. There's a particular day that sticks out where it just kind of all clicked into place. And I guess prior to that, there was a period of about 5 months where I really wasn't feeling good about myself, where I really didn't know what was up, and I couldn't put my finger on it, and then I had that sort of breakthrough realization. In slightly more broad terms, probably about 5 years before that was when I stopped kind of identifying as male, but not in a very conscious sense. It was just kind of a very loose feeling that the idea of being male or masculine didn't really connect with me in any sort of meaningful way. But at the time, this was kind of, as I said, just a bit of a loose feeling. I didn't have any real notion about it, and it didn't lead to any sort of revelation or sort of reimagining of who I am. Just for context, I'm 28, so this is, I guess, I've gone through a fair bit of life already before kind of coming to this point. And I would say that I think a lot of trans women, obviously not all trans women, but or trans people, they can kind of look back at their life and go, oh, okay, like I know what this is now, and here's all of the signs, whether you were cognizant of them or not. For me, there were a few, but it was as much a surprise to me as I think it was like my family and friends.
Okay. And that's actually a very common trait, looking back and being able to see, oh, well, this and this. But you know what? We had no real understanding of it at the time. We can always fit our experiences into our understanding of ourselves today. But, that does not necessarily mean that that's the motivation behind them. I mean, I played with My Little Pony when I was a little kid. I loved unicorns. I have had no male friends in my life, for no male, like, close friends in my life.
Yeah.
So, it's, I can look back and say all of these things are signs that I was always meant to be, I was always a woman. I just didn't realize it. But the reality is that it's more complicated than that. And so, our experiences will lead us to wherever we're going. So now, what is this moment that led you realize that, oh my goodness, I'm a woman? What was this moment?
Yeah. So, as I kind of just mentioned, there was a period of a number of months beforehand where I was just really feeling down about myself. And I think part of the reason I was feeling so down about myself is because I knew something was wrong. Wrong is obviously not a good word to use here. There's a negative connotation there, but I'm grasping for a better word. But I just knew something didn't make sense in a way that I could understand. And the fact that I couldn't put my finger on it was making me feel worse about it.
Okay.
And so this is kind of a very sort of like growing, strong feeling. And it was starting to affect my mood, my like ability to just do work and concentrate on things. And it was just starting to affect like my friendships and relationships. And so on the day in question, shall we say, I was at a friend's house. One of my good friends from work. I try to be friends with the people I work with. I know that doesn't work for everyone, but we take turns going to each other's house, hosting each other for dinner, and then watching a film. And I went to his house on this particular night, and we were watching a film that I've seen 4 or 5 times before. And I was so completely out of it and not engaging with the situation that halfway through the film, I just lost my place. And it was only when I left that I was kind of aware that I'd been buried in my phone, sort of distracting myself. And walking home, I felt, wow, I've been a really horrible friend here. And I sent my friend a text message just to say, I'm really sorry, like I didn't feel present in the room. And it didn't feel like we were having the sort of evening we should have been having as friends. Like I wasn't very chatty. Just kind of felt like I was drifting through the day. And so that upset me because if there's anything that upsets me, it's hurting my friends. And I felt like I let my friend down. So on my way home, I'm then going through the mental process of, okay, you've hurt your friend. Why? And the question there, why, it was not a question I'd really been asking myself very much. And so this then led me on to, okay, well, you're not feeling good about yourself at the moment. What's up with that? And long story short, eventually later in the evening, that led to just this realization that I don't strongly identify with my birth sex or birth gender.
Right.
And then it was like, okay, well, what does that mean? And fortunately, there were, I could do a bit of research and sort of search my feelings a bit, and there were a few labels that potentially applied. In particular, thinking obviously trans, which ended up being my experience, but also possibly non-binary or gender fluid, or something in that sort of space. And it then just took me a few days to kind of like really get my head around that and sort of do a bit more introspection, because once I'd opened that door, it then became sort of like the only thing I wanted to do was just kind of like figure out this thing about myself. And yeah, it took a few days, and once I got home, and when these feelings were getting quite real, and it was like that magic sort of that last piece of the jigsaw all clips into place, and it all just kind of makes a bit more sense. I'd actually gone out to the shops to do a bit of late night shopping and put some petrol in the car, and I ended up having to come home because I was getting quite emotional. And I remember vividly thinking, I need to pull over and have a cry, and if I do that, I'm not going to be able to get home. So I powered on and got home. And I didn't end up crying in the end, but it was, that was I can take you back to that day quite vividly. I can walk you through it. So that was kind of, as far as I'm concerned, that's kind of like day one of being trans.
All right, and I think that's a very common moment for so many of us. It's we can have these feelings, even those of us like myself who always felt that something was out of alignment, and that's, instead of saying it's wrong, things weren't matching up. I knew it from a very early age, but I also knew that I was who I was supposed to. I'm living the life that is expected of me. But the moment that I fully accepted and finally had my brain around it, I broke down. I was crying so much for all the things that could have been, for all the things that I was going to have to face. I was scared. I mean, there's so much that we have to confront in these moments. So, absolutely. Now, so you've had this epiphany, you've had this realization moment. This is day one. What did you do from there?
So I guess I'm fortunate enough to have one of my very close friends just so happens to be trans. This is something that I've known. She's told me, she's wanted to tell me and share that part of herself. And I've been around trans people in work and social situations before, so the concept of being trans was not a new one to me. And I knew I wanted to talk to her, and I specifically the evening after came home and just started having a conversation with her, and I was like, hey, I've been having some feelings recently and I want to just kind of run them by you and get your take. And I very intentionally didn't explain what I thought the feelings were and that how I was perhaps going to be identifying going forward, because I just wanted to get her real unbiased thought. Yeah, exactly. And I laid it all out there for her, and she goes quiet a little bit, and she goes, yeah, I know those feelings very well. And she kind of did what I was doing, and she's like, I don't want to put words in your mouth. And I'm like, that's kind of what I just, please tell me what you're thinking. And she's like, that sounds like gender dysphoria. And I was like, yeah, like, we're on the same page here. And I explained to her, because at this point I kind of hadn't really fully settled on a label, and I know labels aren't necessarily the most important thing, but it felt reassuring to be able to kind of put some words to it. And yeah, just sort of within the next 24 hours of that, it really sort of clicked into place, and I was like, okay, yes, this is who I am. I confided in a friend at work, a lovely person called Catherine, who get on really well with, and would just chat online just during the work day. And I was like, I want to tell you something, and it's really heavy, so please bear with me. But I just need to tell someone. Then that evening I had a conversation with my girlfriend, because I really wanted to tell her as soon as possible, and it was chewing me up inside, not knowing how that was going to go down. And I guess the practical, unfortunate thing about it was I had to kind of make peace with the fact that this could be it for us. But going through that sort of acceptance process, I'd said to myself, look, how I feel about myself and my identity is more important than the relationship. And if that has to stop for me to be who I am, that's got to be the decision that I take. And that, it would be unfortunate if that were the case. I'd like to continue the relationship as well as be trans, but fortunately that is exactly what happened. And my girlfriend Sophie is really fantastic. I say to people that transitioning is not just something you're going through. Your friends and family and loved ones are going through it just as much as you are. And that was definitely the case. But I actually think we're stronger for it, because she loves me for who I am, and who I am now is so much more than who I used to be. I'm so much more full of life, and I've got a confidence I never used to have. So it's fantastic.
May I ask how long you two were together prior to your coming out?
So probably about 2.5 years. We're
Okay.
coming up on 3 years now.
All right. And absolutely, as you said, those who love us and those who care for us go through this process just as much. And it's often referred to as a grieving process for the person they're losing. But at the same time, in your situation where you and mine as well, I don't feel like I lost someone so much as, evolving into something so much more full and robust as a person, just so much more well balanced. But at the same time, looking at it from their point of view, the person that they fell in love with, if they fell in love with you skin deep, can be lost. Now, I do know that I'm not this. I don't have the same personality that I had before, so it is possible that they're not going to be attracted to my personality, but. It's wonderful to hear that you have that support, because too often that's a common story that the other way, where the person has lost absolutely everything just to be true to themselves. So make sure you take care of that one, because
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so talking about your work, you said you spoken to some people there. What is it that you do?
So I am a software developer. I build apps and websites.
Yes, I know. I just wanted everybody else to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so if for everyone's edification, Jess and I first met when she approached me, or she sent me a DM about being involved in a project for her work. I'm assuming, yes. And I'll let her explain it, but it really made me have to stop and think, and I'm very glad that I did, because so often we get messages, as trans women, we get some weird messages. So so tell me about this project. What was it for? What was the point of it?
So I guess as a developer, I had the opportunity to put in to give a talk at a local developer meet in my city, and I came up with an idea for a talk. I wanted to do a talk there for a while, but I hadn't really found something that I was really interested in talking about and was also knowledgeable enough to give a talk about. But I decided to put in to give a talk about how the web can be better designed with trans people in mind. And so the point of the talk was to show designers and developers the sort of things that trans people have to deal with online, and how things can be developed on the web in a conscientious, equal way that respects sort of what they're going through and how they're identifying, just in terms of like personal information. So the main things I talked about in the talk were your name, and sort of related to that, like your title. It's a bit of an old-fashioned thing for me, and I don't really like using it, but it's a thing. And also like your gender identity and the difference between gender and sex, and when it's okay to ask for sex and how you would go about doing that. So it really just kind of boiled down to people change their name, and that's not a trans thing either. That's just a thing that people do. Also, your name can be in your email address and it can be in your username. So people also need to be able to change those. And then when it comes to gender, just, like asking male, female isn't good enough. It really isn't. And I found it really fascinating talking with people like yourself about how you would express your gender given the choice, because I found, I asked 2 or 3 trans women this question and I got 3 different answers. I asked some non-binary and gender fluid people this question and I got more different answers. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a complicated, the idea of the talk is, okay, so what can we do? And the answer is not simple. Aside from make sure there's good options, and even just a few extra options on top of male and female can make a huge difference. And also possibly give people the chance to pick more than one gender identity, if that makes sense. But again, just also let people change it. If people change their identity, just make it really simple for them to do that. So it was a really fantastic talk. It was very well received. I had people come up to me afterwards and just say, that was really fantastic. You're an inspiration. I'd like to ask you some more questions if that's okay. And it was just a really warm, positive experience. I really enjoyed it.
And that's absolutely wonderful. So often, those of us who can be visible, those of us who can speak to the public, can really change the lives of those who cannot. And now, my personal recommendation for a gender box would just be to a fill in the blank. Leave it open, and then it'll submit. And because honestly, why does Google need to know my gender?
Yeah. So my personal recommendation would be to just not ask.
Yeah. Just in most cases, not asking is the appropriate question. So absolutely true. Now, firstly, are you out everywhere? I'm assuming if you're doing talks in front of groups of people, you are, but I'm not going to assume this because I'm often wrong.
Yeah, I am indeed out everywhere. It was really important to me to be out everywhere. Very quickly, I wanted to tell people. I am not very good at holding a secret. I am not very good at keeping things from my friends and family. So, as I mentioned, within a few days of this notion even crossing my mind, I was telling some of the closest people to me about this. Almost with reckless abandon. It was just like, I caught one of my friends at work, sort of at the end of the day, and we were the only two in the office, and this was like day 5, and I was like, oh, by the way, can I just tell you something? And it was really liberating, because I know these people, and I wouldn't tell people that I didn't think were going to have the reaction that I wanted, at least initially. But I came out at work very early. I can't remember the exact timeline now, but I may have came out to my entire office, 20 of us, before I told my parents. But then I told my mum and my sister on one day, and then the following day I went and told my dad and stepmom. So very quickly a lot of that was covered off. The main sort of delay with being out to everyone was sort of my extended family, and that was a slightly complicated situation, and it wasn't very fun, because my sister was getting married, and as you'd imagine, this was sort of on the cards before I came out, or before I realised I was trans. And I told my family and I told my sister, and so one of the first questions was, well, you're going to my wedding in a few months, what are we doing? How would you like to be presenting on that day? Do whatever you want, but what do you want to do? And I kind of felt like I didn't really have an option other than to just present as male, unfortunately, because it was really early in my transition. I didn't have the confidence to sort of do that out in public, and didn't have the confidence to do it in front of family. I certainly didn't want it to be the first time they'd seen me like that, as my true female self. And so, yeah, I kind of also made myself do it, but I went to my sister's wedding as a man, and that was the last time I've presented as male, and it was possibly the worst day of my life. It wasn't very pleasant. I knew I was living a lie. It felt like I was wearing a bad costume. And there was a really awful moment where it was family photo time once we got to the reception. And so, my family's really well organized with these things. There was a literal sheet of paper with a list of all of the photos that they wanted. And as soon as I was aware of this, my girlfriend and I disappeared up to a hotel room for over half an hour, conveniently. And funnily enough, we were looking at wedding magazines and getting bad ideas. So
that's what they say about weddings.
Yeah. So just to kind of end this sort of anecdote on a positive message, I had the full support of my sister on that day. She went out of her way, despite the fact that it was her wedding day, to come over to me and sort of privately ask how things were going. I managed to talk to my cousins on that day and come out to them without telling the rest of the family, because they are never in one place at the same time. It was too good an opportunity to not. And then the following day, I went with my sister, her new husband, my girlfriend, to get my ears pierced, which I'd been holding off on until after the wedding, because there would be questions otherwise. And my girlfriend and I then went back to my house, and we spent a good bit of time throwing out a lot of my male clothes, or charity bagging them as well, which was
straight too. Good job.
Yeah, because it kind of felt like I'd been holding that back until after the wedding, and so after having a really rough day the day before, it was nice to do something very liberating and very self-fulfilling.
Okay. Now, I would like to, most of our viewers are going to be in the United States, so
Yes.
we have a completely different approach to healthcare.
Yeah.
And most would argue a broken approach to healthcare. But for myself, when I finally admitted to myself that I was in fact a woman, and I was transgender, and I had decided that hormones and HRT was for me, I sought out medical providers and was denied repeatedly until I found a more charitable organization called Planned Parenthood here in the States. That allowed for informed consent, but it's still out of my pocket. So I'm paying $400 every time I go for an appointment, plus $150 for every single prescription that I get. So what's the process in the UK? I know there's universal health care. I know there are. Is there still gatekeeping though? I mean, what's the process for you?
So there is a process. For those who aren't aware of what it's like in the UK for healthcare, we've got the National Health Service, or NHS, which is free at the point of use, and it's paid for through taxes. It's universal healthcare in a manner of speaking. Prescriptions on the NHS cost, I think it's £10, regardless of what you're getting. So if you have to go and get a prescription filled, it's just £10. The challenge.
That's $13.75 for us in the States, folks.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
It doesn't matter whether you're just getting something for a sore throat or whether you're getting, estrogen. It's still £10. The challenge actually is getting into the system and getting the prescription. The first thing that I did, and this is kind of the regular sort of way that you go about this, is I went and saw my GP. GP is general practitioner, aka your doctor. Booked an appointment for gender dysphoria, had a very lovely chat with her. Our doctors in the UK are part of their training syllabus these days, as I found out, includes trans issues. As it happened, my doctor was a trainee. A lot of people at my practice are going through that process. And she was saying that one of her close friends, when she sat her medical exam, the case study that she was doing was about a trans person, which was really cool. So it's good to know that there's education there in the system. I had a conversation with her about how I was feeling, how I was identifying, and of course she was then going to ask me what it was that I wanted her to do for me. And I knew going into that appointment what I wanted and what the options were. So she referred me to a gender clinic. Now, a gender clinic is like a specialised unit that deals with all manner of gender issues. So being trans is one sort of subset of things that they deal with. There's a limited amount of gender clinics in the UK on the NHS. I can't remember off the top of my head how many, but we're talking like around 10. It just so happens that my closest one is in my city.
Wow,
I know some people have to travel 50 or more miles to get to one. Yeah, it's really convenient. It's a 2-minute walk from one of my friends' houses as well. So the challenge then is there's a big waiting list. And depending on sort of demand, that waiting list is 6 months to 3 years, which is a long time. But once you get onto that waiting list, at least you're potentially going somewhere. And so that waiting list is for my first appointment. So that's not to get hormones, that is to just have a first appointment. Part of the problem here without too clinical is that... sorry, go on.
So I'm saying, so there are some benefits to paying out of pocket then. Because, for me, between the time that I, figured everything out and the time I was actually on hormones was about 8 months. And that's because I tried to go through endocrinologists as opposed to going through a more LGBTQ friendly. So continue, please.
Yeah, so that is actually an option effectively in the UK as well, because in the UK you've got public and private healthcare. Most people will go through public healthcare, which is the NHS, and then private healthcare. It's linked into the NHS somehow, but basically it's a different company who will charge you for their services. The main advantage with private healthcare is just waiting time. Because if you need like hip replacement surgery on the NHS, you might be waiting quite a long time. But if you have the means to pay, then you could be getting seen within a month. So this is very much the case with private healthcare here. I'm actually in the process of looking into this because I think that the waiting time is abhorrent, and I'm not sure I can stomach waiting multiple years to kind of progress medically.
Absolutely.
So there's a place up in Edinburgh, which is an hour and a half by train, or I could go down to London, which is about 4 hours by train.
Well, that gives me a very good idea about where you're at then. I was curious. It's like the accent sounded like somewhere in the region of Sheffield, but...
Bit higher.
I'm close though, right?
Kind of, yeah. So Sheffield is in the north, and when we say the north and south, we're on about in England specifically. So I'm in the northeast, and if you go much further than where I am, you end up in Scotland.
Okay.
Apparently the northeastern accent is the most trustworthy in the UK, and that's why a lot of the call centres in the UK are in the northeast.
Well, better there than Mumbai. So you're currently not medically transitioning. How do you deal with...
Unfortunately, yeah.
Right. So how do you deal with the dysphoria in a situation where you are prevented for... I mean, do you have a timeline at this point? Is it just a wait list and they'll let you know? Firstly, how long are you looking at right now? What's the expectation? You said 6 months to 3 years. Do you have any idea where on that timeline you are?
I don't. I probably should try and find out, though. I can ring them up and just ask, and I don't know whether I'll get an answer. From what I'm seeing online is a lot of people kind of figure out how long the waiting list is by someone will say, I just had my first appointment and I got myself in the queue on this date. It's like, the waiting list is this long at the moment. That I'm not convinced they will tell me, how long the wait is or where I am in the queue if I ask. But I might as well try.
Absolutely. But with this process, with this not knowing how long it could possibly be, how do you function on a day-to-day basis? I mean, now that you've accepted yourself, and you said that one of the worst days of your life was the day that you were forced to, not forced to, but you chose to present male and kind of were stuck with your decision. How do you function on, presentation, of course, but how do you deal with dysphoria?
As best as I can, which is not a great answer, but I can be in two minds about the waiting list. On the one hand, it's not nice to be waiting and not feeling like there's any progress being made,
Right.
and not sort of medically transitioning does feel at times like I'm not making progress, and that's a very real anxious feeling. I try my best to put that feeling out of my mind and kind of just accept that I am going through the correct channels. This is progressing. It's just there's no sort of tangible feeling of that right now. So I'm instead trying to focus my energies in other areas, and just trying to take the little victories as I go. I mean, like I'm growing my hair out. I mean,
Yeah.
I basically didn't have any hair when I started, and we're getting some good length now.
As I said, you posted some really wonderful shots just after you visited the salon. Just your stylist, absolutely wonderful.
She's a miracle worker.
My hair, I actually started from scratch too. I had shaved my head in my final act of defiance and denial. And so this is since, I've been growing this out since I started transitioning. So, it gets there.
Yeah.
So absolutely, we can do gender affirming actions. We can dress how we want. We can do our makeup. We can do our nails and our hair. We can work on voice therapy if you are looking, and things like that. There are so many ways, and those can combat the dysphoria. I can just not even wrap my head around with that kind of with that challenge of not knowing. I want to know everything. The idea of any uncertainty would make me nuts. So, have you had any euphoria moments? I mean, you're not transitioning yet, not medically transitioning yet, but have you been able to experience like gender-related euphoria as you accept yourself?
Yes. Yes, it's fantastic. I can say yes. I've definitely had some really nice moments. I've definitely had some moments where I felt like I passed, which I know can be a bit of a thorny word. But yes, I've been out on nights out on a Friday in the city, and I've had interactions with people where it was very clear that they felt I was female. And I try not to get too wrapped up on the notion of either someone thinking that I am, like a cis female, versus somebody acknowledging that I'm a trans woman and treating me the way I would want to be treated.
Right.
Because I think that's kind of like poisonous mind games where it's
absolutely.
like, they might just see a woman and so they're reacting that way. And in my mind, I'm going, oh, well, it's just because I look awful and they're just trying to be polite. So I try to get rid of that thought as much as possible. But
honestly, in this particular situation, it's the treatment that matters, not the motivation behind it.
Exactly.
So as long as I'm being treated as a woman with respect as a woman, then what does it matter to what their motivation is? Now, my overly critical mind is always going to say that it's, oh no, they don't mean it, blah, blah. But as you said, it is a poison pill, and it can be so damaging to our development as a person. So, okay. Now, so we've spoken about work. Now, let me talk about your family. You said they're very supportive as a whole, or just have there been any incidents, whether family or friends or loved ones of any kind? Have you had any problems that have come up with your transition?
Yes, I think it probably comes as no surprise to you that the older generation are having a slightly harder time with it. Just kind of to start on a positive note and not tar my entire family with the same brush. My parents and my sister and my stepmom have been really supportive. Right from day one, they made it very clear that no matter who you are, no matter who what you're going through, I'm still family. They're going to treat me exactly as they would. As you'd imagine, there is a sort of a adjustment process as they get used to my chosen name and my chosen pronouns. and that's almost perfect in terms of the family. At work, no one gets it wrong anymore, and I'm very happy to say that there are now people at work who have joined since I started transitioning, who never knew the old me, and don't even like know my dead name, which is so precious to me. But yeah, so when I think the last people that I came out to in the family were my grandparents. I knew, and my mum, whose parents they are, also knew that it was going to be a bit of a tough moment. I think because I went with my mum, and when we both got out of the car, she was more nervous than I was. And I think part of that was she knew that she was going to have to sort of be there and help them pick up the pieces, in a manner of speaking, and help them through the process. As you mentioned earlier, a bit the idea of a grieving process for the person lost, and that's definitely been the case with my grandparents. But yeah, when I first went in, I had my ears pierced recently, and they very quickly picked up on that, and so it was like, okay, well, we're getting straight into this now then. And the immediate reaction was negative. The response was, that's a big blow. That's not good. Stuff to the effect of something is wrong with you, and not voiced in a malicious way. It was kind of, it was like they'd just been told that someone in the family had died. And so when I've came out to people, there's always a degree of kind of like explaining how I feel, and if need be, kind of what my experience of being trans is and what I feel like what trans is to me. And I guess with my grandparents, I had to kind of go the extra mile and be like, look, I need you also to understand what society thinks about people who are trans and how society is right now. So one of the questions that they asked, expecting quite a negative answer, was, how's this going to affect your career and your job prospects? And I said, well, to be perfectly honest, it does affect my job and my career in a positive way, which threw them for a loop. Because I said, my industry is predominantly male. I identify as female, so I'm now sort of in the minority, and that's good for diversity, and it makes me hireable. I don't really want to get into how I'm not happy.
No, I can understand. Yeah. A company wants to be seen as diverse. They want to have a broader view, and so somebody from the trans experience is going to have a different perspective. Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
And just also like the letters LGBT meant zero to them, and so a celebration of diversity in modern culture was kind of a bit lost on them. So there was a kind of a very quick sort of 1940s to the 2010s sort of catch-up that needed to be done. And I think once they had a bit more perspective on that, ultimately when my mum and I left, they did declare their support. They said, at the end of the day, you're still our grandchild, and we love you very much. I just think from then on, it's just been a bit harder for them to sort of adjust and get used to the names. I mean, my grandparents are getting on, their memory's not as good as it used to be, and I can, I try to be quite lenient with people when they're getting my name and my pronouns wrong. I've said to basically everyone that as long as you're trying, make as many mistakes as you need to, and I'll try not to overly correct you unless I feel like you're doing it a lot recently. Fortunately, most of the people that I know, they do beat themselves up quite a bit when they get it wrong, so it's fairly well self-regulating. But with my grandparents, I do have to kind of hammer the point home. I was actually at their house for dinner tonight, with the family, and there were 4 or 5 occasions where I had to correct pronouns in particular. Pronouns seems to be a bit of a harder thing for them to get their head around.
Right.
But on the whole, they still treat me the same. They don't fail to acknowledge my femininity. they have talked to me about like, what would you like for Christmas? And it's like no surprise to them when I'm like, probably makeup and dresses.
Yeah.
So there's definitely progress being made. It was just that very sort of sharp, visceral, initial negative reaction. And it just took a bit of context for them to understand why it wasn't a grievance and it was more of a celebration.
Right. And I think if given the opportunity, I think so many of us could probably make that same kind of success story. Too often, I think those in our lives that are going to cut us out do so rapidly and in such a reflex reaction that we're not even given the time to explain and help them over that barrier. For me, my mother, as soon as I told her, her response was, "I can send you to conversion therapy or you're dead to me." These were my two choices. And neither of them were good, but I wasn't about to go put myself in the hands of some person who was going to submit me to electric shock therapy because because transgender is evil. It's nonsense. So I think if we had the opportunity to, really educate those in our lives that are looking to exclude us, we might be more successful. Okay, so now you mentioned the pronouns. How do you go about? How do you go about correcting someone on their pronouns? Because this is a very personal kind of thing. It's everybody's a little different. What is your personal method? It's like, do you just say she, or is there more to it than that?
I guess it depends who it is. When it comes to sort of like the people that I work with, they tend to know when they've done it wrong. I had this happen recently, and it was pretty much one of the managers of the company accidentally used the wrong pronouns, and he immediately just kind of stopped and went, "Huh, I got that wrong. I'm really sorry." And I was like, "No, good on you. Like, it's been so long since you got it wrong, and you're allowed to get it wrong every now and then. That's fine." He got that. Like, he immediately got that, and he corrected himself.
And I'll say this: in a situation where someone hasn't gotten it wrong in a long period of time and they slip, we do that all the time. We do it anyway. We have those moments where we say the wrong name or the wrong gender or the wrong pronoun. It has nothing to do with the person being, their gender identity. It's just because, we're people and our brain is thinking a million things at once. So good for him for, owning up to it. But at the same time, we're, like you said, we're allowed to make mistakes. We're people.
Yeah, like I've said before something like, "Oh, I'm such a lucky guy." No, I'm not a guy. It's
right.
just when you try to put that phrase together, that's just where your mind goes. With my grandparents, I've had to adopt a slightly different tactic, and my family to a slightly lesser extent. Obviously, the people who I work with have known me for, a few years, whereas my family have known me for 28. So it's more deeply ingrained in them. So I always try to correct in the first instance, just so it's then immediately just on their mind. And this is the same for my name and my pronouns. So, I will literally, like, if they say he, I will just say she. And usually they'll go, "Oh, sorry, yes, she." And then it'll move on. With my grandparents, I do have to be a little more aggressive. So if I correct them, and either they kind of don't acknowledge it or they don't sort of like pick up on it, the conversation just stops. So if they've just asked me something and, or they're like trying to get my attention and they use my dead name, I'm just not going to respond. And I'll just kind of make a point of, "Oh, I'm not recognizing that name because that's not me. So, if you want to call me my actual name, then I'll, oh yes, yeah, what can I help you with?" And like tonight, I did have to correct pronouns multiple times. I don't really like doing it every single time, but like when it becomes clear that there's been a few instances, like in the last few minutes or whatever, then I'll make a point of it again. and just kind of put it back into people's memory. Kind of going back to work, particularly earlier on in my transition, I had a particularly unpleasant moment where my manager misgendered me, used the wrong pronouns 6 or 7 times in the space of like a minute in front of a client, which wasn't fun. As I said, I try to be very lenient and understanding.
Right, but that's
this
excessive.
Yeah. So this was the first time we'd had a conference call with this client that I was about to be doing some work with, and there was an element of introduction. So this is Jess, and she's going to be joining the team. Correct pronoun.
Right.
And then at some point, 5-10 minutes into the meeting, my manager is asked a question by the client. It's like, okay, well, who's going to be doing this work? And then it's like, oh, Jess is going to be doing this work, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do that, and it'll be him that you'll go to for this. And it's just like, he, him, he.
With he, you could be like, okay, I didn't hear it properly, maybe, but with him, there's no excusing. There's no way to get to pretend that you heard it.
And of course, I'm not going to do something with the client right there. I'm not going to correct with the client right there. I don't want to draw attention to it. But I'm now thinking to myself, well, this is the first time the client has met me, and now you're kind of giving mixed signals about my gender identity. So I really didn't feel very good about this, and it was the first time that something so bothersome, that bothered me so much, had happened at work. And I'm really anti-confrontational. So this was right at the end of the day, and I came out of the meeting not feeling very well, and I went and sat at my desk, and I just thought to myself, I either need to have a conversation with him about this now, or I need to let him off the hook this time, and if it happens again, then I just need to really make a point of it. And it was the end of the day, and I was tired, and I just wanted to go home. So I was just like, okay, well, either way, I'm not going to deal with it today. If I sleep on it and wake up in the morning and really want to talk to him about it, then we'll do that. As it happens, one of the other guys who was in the meeting, who's more senior than me, he held my manager back after the meeting, and my understanding is he basically went, you need to go and apologise to her right now. And so my manager then comes out from the meeting room and is like, oh, Jess, do you have 2 minutes? And we went back into the meeting room, just the pair of us. And he was extremely apologetic. He was, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I completely mucked up and in front of the client. And, he understood what he'd done, and he was really apologetic about it. And I didn't feel that he was being apologetic because he'd been caught. It felt more sincere than that.
Right.
And I said to him, I don't like correcting people all of the time. I like to kind of let you self-regulate. This was just a bad situation because of the context. But I said to him, how can I help you be better at this? I said, I don't like to call people out on it, particularly every time, but would it be better for you if I did? Do you think me kicking your ass about this would make you get it right more? And he was like, yeah, I think I need that. I think that might help. So we agreed that was going to be the approach. We were both very happy, and it was a bit of a weight off my shoulders because we'd had the conversation and it had been positive. And since then, he has not got it wrong. I've never needed to tell him that he.
And I think that shows the sincerity level. I mean, if he was worried about, oh, I got caught doing this, oh no, let me show an act of contrition as opposed to a genuinely felt emotion, it would be something that happens again. But the fact that it hasn't, I think, says volumes, and says volumes about his character as a leader as well. That owning the mistake, realizing, okay, I didn't do what I should have done as a leader and as a person. and then admitting it and then correcting it. That's, it's a horrible situation, absolutely, but that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I'm fortunate to work in a company full of people like that. Part of the reason that I chose to work where I am, and this was obviously like pre notions of transition, is it's refreshingly honest, open, and transparent. The manager who interviewed me was really a no nonsense, say it how it is kind of person, and I reacted really well to that. So I'm happy and confident there, knowing that if I do have any bother, any trans related issues, that I can just go to someone and just talk about it, and they're just going to tell me, how it is. And I know that my voice is going to get heard. So it's been a really fantastic place to come out. As I said, I came out to work the entire office very early into my transition because, heck, I spend 8 hours a day there.
Oh, absolutely.
And, it's where most of my social interaction happens. Which is a bit sad saying that, but it's true.
No, it's like the rest of us. We work to live and live to work. We're coming up on the end of our time. I like to ask this question: what if you had anything to give advice to a younger person who is identifying as of the trans persuasion? What would your advice be to someone younger, even yourself, perhaps? What would your advice be to yourself or someone younger who's actually identified earlier that they are in fact transgender?
That's a really good question. I think just know that every day you're making progress. Every day that you know that you're trans is a step in the right direction. Every little thing that you do is taking you one step further on your journey. I definitely have days where I feel like I'm not making progress. As we've covered, my medical situation doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. My dysphoria is really high today, or the world's just grinding me down a little bit. But find those small victories and really cherish them. Every day, this hair gets slightly longer. Every day, I get slightly better at putting an eyeliner on, for example. It's really small things like that. I've often tried to explain to people particularly who aren't trans, who are like, how do you even go about making changes like this in your life? And I explain it's like building a brick wall. You start with one brick, and if you want to put more bricks on, you have to put one brick at a time, and it creates a foundation for the next row of bricks. And so it's the little things that you need to cherish. Start small and just start just slightly outside of your comfort zone. Do just a little thing and just see how it goes. The first time that I wore female clothes outside was in the dead of night around my housing estate with my girlfriend, grabbing onto her hand for dear life.
Oh, I remember those moments very well. Yeah. In fact, middle of the night, Okay, we're coming to the end of our time. Jess, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for making yourself available for this. I know it's late for you.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you. For some of our viewers, it is now 3 p.m. And for you, it is now 11:30. So
yeah, it is my bedtime.
It is a significant time difference. Thank you so much. For everyone who's watched or will watch, this video will be available on my YouTube channel at Transfigure Nation. Also available through the Instagram page Transfigure Nation. That's all together, one word. And I will post the link there. Jess, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, remember to be kind to yourself, be kind to others, but always remember to be yourself. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time.